good morning, Father's House friends and family. Thank you once again for joining us on our Sunday morning video service. We had such a great time last week sharing the announcements that we decided it would be fun to do it again.
We might do this every week.
I'm not so sure it's going to be fun. It was so much fun last week that I made him do the announcements on Sunday. Anyway, we don't have much to go over. Our ladies group is meeting on Thursday nights on Zoom at 6:30. If you want to be part of that, let myself or Deanne Paradis know. We're studying characters of the Bible, and this week we had to skip this week. And so Thursday night we'll be studying on David. So if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you be a part of it.
Also on Monday nights, we still have our men's meeting that we're going through the book of Romans. That starts at 6:30. It also is on Zoom. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, you'll be able to see at the bottom of our screen here in a little bit my email address where you can email saying you want to be a part of that. It starts at 6:30 Monday nights and goes till 8 o'clock. And we'll make sure you get the material that you need as we go through the book of Romans using Charles Barkley book on the book, commentary on the book of Romans. So like I said, we've been at it for a year and a half into one book. We're not anywhere even close to being done with it, but we're having a good time in the book of Romans.
Next week, September 19th, is National Back to Church Sunday. So I'd personally like to invite each and every one of you to come and be a part of that with us. Everybody's getting back to school. It's time to get back to church.
That works. Works for me, it works for you.
Hey, we're back. Everyone should be back.
Yeah, if we're back, everybody should be back. Anyway, if we've got to be here, you've got to be here. Maybe that's how we should say it. Well, I guess you don't have to. You could have freedom of choice not to be here, but we'd absolutely love to have you. The only other thing that we have to mention today is our regular weekly tithe and offering. As you know, with this COVID thing, we've been behind. I do have to say the good news is that we are catching up slowly but surely. It looks like every month is getting to be a better month, and so I want to thank you for all of your giving. You can give a couple of different ways. You can give online at thefathershouse.org. Go to the giving button. It'll take you to a screen. There you can give online, and when you give online, you can set up either a one-time donation or a recurring donation, so you give once a week, once a month, or whatever way you want to give. You can do that. Also on that screen, you'll see that you can give to missions, and also what our capital improvements fund, or a fund that we've set up to be able to put, as we talked about putting up a virtual wall behind our stage on Sunday mornings. You know, we have two, if you've been to our church, you know that we have two projectors that project songs and different scenes and stuff up on the sides of our stage. Well, one of those went out. And when those go out, they're very expensive to fix, about $5,000 each. So it's not cheap because you have to get a very powerful one because of the size of our auditorium. Well, you know, that's old technology. It's about 10 or 15, maybe even 20-year-old technology. New technology is a virtual wall, which is an LED wall, high definition, where it's not projected, but it's like a large TV. Well, we want to do a virtual wall behind our stage, and that will become where we'll set the scene, whatever our stage is. We'll have our songs and different things up in there so that people can follow us along and sing along. And that's going to cost us about $20,000 to install. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but we've got a couple of things to help us. Our Spanish congregation meets here, our sister church with Pastor Azarte and his group, are trying to raise as much money as they can for it as well. And I want to tell you, they're doing a very good job. So we can do that too. And so it's almost 2 for 1. Any money that they put in and we put in, that virtual wall now comes down to $10,000. So if we can start to give to that, then we know that that will be taken care of. Also in the past, as you know, we've been taking a separate second offering on the second Sunday of every month for capital improvements, just to do things that need to be done around the church other than what is done by way of our general budget. Well, you know, there's some money that's there, and so what we found is there's about $2,500 already in that account without breaking that account. There's about $2,500 in that account that we can take to add to the virtual wall, so that and the other monies that we've gotten, we're well on our way to be about between $3,000 and $4,000 already for our virtual wall, both churches included. For us to order the virtual wall, we have to have $5,000 of the 20,000 because we have to have it made. And it's got to be made. The only manufacturers are in China. It's got to be made there and shipped here. So we're hoping to get it ordered as soon as possible and hopefully to have it by Christmas or shortly after that. And that's kind of our goal. So we'll have to raise the rest of money after we get the initial money to pay for the down payment on the wall. Anything that you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. Also, you can write a check to the Father's House, mailed into 133 Bernal Road, San Jose, California, 95119, which is on your screen as well. And we can figure this stuff out. We're going to get it done. It seems like a lot of money, but if we just do it $1 at a time, we're definitely going to get there. Anything you can do, regular tithe and offering, and also for this wall, a virtual wall that we want to put in, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Just so that you know, if you do give online, when it drops down, we've set up the account as Stage Remodel. So that'll be directly going to that account if you're interested in doing it online.
So it's Stage Remodel. Okay, that's good to know. See, you're always ahead of the game when it comes to that kind of stuff.
You announced I was going to get it online.
I did tell you guys that she had to get it online, didn't I? It's like, see, that's her job. I get to come up and create this stuff. It's her job to make it happen. So I'm glad to know that my wife is doing her job and you did get that done. I'm proud of you for getting that done. You're a good wife and you're a good pastor. I'm proud to serve with you. I just want you to know that. And besides that, you're really pretty too. So anyway, we're starting a new series today. We've been talking about this series. It's called, we're really dealing with critical issues and biblical perspectives, or really a biblical perspective or a Christian perspective on different issues that we're facing today. In other words, there's a lot of stuff that's being said out there, here or there, about whether it be Black Lives Matter, defund the police, whatever the case might be, where sometimes we don't understand what the Christian perspective is on it because we've got so many voices from different directions that are talking to us about it. So today we want to breach, and maybe it will run into next week. I don't know, maybe it'll run into more than that. But we want to talk about this issue and this idea of critical race theory. Is that what we want to talk about today?
Yeah.
What do you think? This topic's pretty tough to talk about, don't you think?
Yes, it is. It's very, very deep.
And why would you say that?
I would say because it's a challenge for people to have a rational conversation about things that they're emotionally charged about and keep the emotion out of it.
Right. And I think that that's true. It's interesting because the subjects that we're going to talk about for the next couple of weeks, I understand that they're very controversial subjects. I also understand they're packed with emotion. If I was in a philosophy class and talking with people in a philosophy class, and we were to discuss critical race theory or anything that we're going to talk about, emotion would stay out of it because they're trained to not use their emotion, but to use their reason. Part of the problem is that when we use our emotion in discussing these things, then what happens is we provoke one another, really then really come up with any kind of a constructive argument or a constructive way to look at what we're talking about that will help us as Christians know where we stand and how we can help society. So that's about all I've got to say about that. How about you? You got anything else you want to say about it?
Yeah, first of all, Pastor Carl, I'd like to know what critical race theory even is.
Oh, you want to know what critical race theory is?
What is it?
Well, it's critical race theory, or we can call it CRT, right? So if we go CRT, it's just shorter for critical race theory. So what do you think CRT is in your studies?
Well, in studying this for this series and asking these questions, I knew you were going to turn it back on me, so I couldn't just come in and ask the question.
She always thinks I do that.
I knew it was going to be more of a discussion. But what I found is that it's a study on how color and socioeconomics can affect people's lives. It was originally started by attorneys to use with the law to present cases for and against issues that could become racial situations.
Or racially charged situations in law. Yeah, I mean, that's a part of that's kind of what CRT, critical race theory, that's kind of part of what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is really, and it kind of comes back down to, even there's a layer above critical race theory, which is called critical theory, no brainer. So just critical theory, which is a philosophical construct that really comes from it comes from what's called the Frankfurt School in Germany. I won't get into any of that, but anyway, long story short, what it is a theory that basically criticizes any kind of a system that imposes any kind of oppression on another group. So that oppression, in this case, when you're talking about critical race theory, has everything to do with the oppression either systemically, by way of whatever's built into our system, our government, economic system, whatever, that basically oppresses somebody of a different color. And so what happens is it becomes very critical, but it doesn't become critical in a way to where it wants to destroy necessarily in its pure form, where it wants to destroy, but it wants to say, I think we've got to challenge maybe what some of our underlying views are about racism. And in particular for us, racism in America and critical race theory in most cases now, we'll talk about this maybe a little later, black-white issue, but it's the idea of, are you, because you're white, treated different than a person of color? And if so, then those are critical conversations that we have to have so that we bring equality to both people. That's what critical race theory is in a nutshell within itself.
So why should the church be talking about critical race theory?
Well, that's another good question, I think. Do you want me to go first, or do you have any ideas as to what you think about it?
Oh, I think you could explain it better.
Oh, thanks. I want you to explain it. You've done a lot of studying on this as well. We actually are a little studied on this one. So, why is it important to the church? Okay. The reason I think it's important to the church is because of this. I think sometimes as a church we live in this altruistic world of, I'm a Christian, I'm going to heaven, so I really don't have to care what happens in society. Now that poses several problems though, because it's almost like we just check out of the world. But the fact is that we live in a world today where critical race theory is at the forefront of our governmental discussions. You see it continually popping up on news channels. You see that certain states and certain people are trying to mandate that it is being taught in school. So if we don't understand what critical race theory is, and if we don't talk about it in the church, how do we ever establish what a Christian position would be concerning critical race theory? I mean, do you think that it would be important to discuss in the church?
Absolutely. I don't think it's discussed enough. I think most people want to believe that racism is a thing of the past and it doesn't happen anymore. And I think as Christians, we should be discussing that yes, it does happen, and what do we do about it?
And I think part of it is that I think that if you look at churches of color, they probably talk about it more than churches that are white. Because whites, if it is true, and I think there's some validity to the fact that the white is the dominant class in America. Not just even white. Okay, so you can say, well, no, because there's people of color that are in Congress or in the Senate. You can, or even we can even look at our vice president currently. But that doesn't mean that the underlying current isn't that white European dominant culture. That's another thing. But so what I'm saying is that when we're talking about it, we are kind of talking about it from a different perspective than I would think that. Well, if we looked at somebody in the east side of San Jose that grew up in poverty, or if we were to look at an African American family that grew up in poverty in Oakland, and this is kind of the heart of critical race theory, they would have a different perspective of what's happening in their lives, boots on the ground type of life, than what we would have, wouldn't you think?
I would think.
So that's why I think it's impossible for the church, or impossible, that's why it's important or essential for the church to talk about it.
Right. So is it optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, again, is it optimistic or critical race theory, optimistic or pessimistic? Well, what do you think? Do you think it's optimistic or do you think it's pessimistic?
I think it can go both ways. I've seen it. We've all watched it. If you watch any newscast, you see it go both ways. I think originally it was set up as a positive, but I think, what was the term you used earlier? It's been hijacked by the media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I see.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point, because I think that when you study critical race, critical race theory, when you study it in its philosophical core, and I'm talking about this now, I'm removing it from what the stuff we get on TV. Because I almost wonder if a news reporter or somebody that's even mandating it that would be taught, if they've ever even studied critical race theory to know what it is in its philosophical origination, which comes from the Frankfurt School, as I talked about, in Germany. And it also then kind of transfers over into what they call philosophical American transcendentalism, but we won't talk about that, but I had to use the big words. So, but I just had to do that. But it spills over into or pragmatism is what it has to do with. But the idea in its core is that it's positive in its core in the philosophical sense if you look at it. And the reason it is because it says we should be critical of any situation where another person is being oppressed or a group of people are being oppressed. That becomes very important because that's very positive. If I was going to give you a biblical example of that, you could go into the Gospel of John, and there's the woman that's caught in adultery. And so the woman that's caught in adultery is in a position, and maybe we'll come back to her a little bit later, but she's in a position where she's caught in a compromised position. She's been caught in adultery. She's a woman in a patriarchal society. And the religious leaders wanting to oppress her come to Jesus, and they say to Jesus, they say, the law of Moses says that she should be struck dead by stoning. What do you say? And Jesus looks at it and say, well, you don't have the right to do that to her just simply because she sinned. I mean, yeah, that's the law of Moses if you want to take it in the strictest sense. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that you ought to be looking at is what's best for her. And right now, what you want to do to her is not the best thing to be done to her because you want to oppress her. And so in that situation, Jesus says, okay, how about this? Any of you that have never sinned, why don't you pick up the first stone and cast it at her? Well, as they thought about it, the wise ones left first, and eventually everybody left because everybody can find themselves in that position. The idea, though, is that when somebody is in that position, and there's a system that keeps a person in that system, that's where critical race theory comes in its pure form and says, stop. That's not right. You can't do that. That's not healthy for anybody. So in that instance, critical race theory is very positive. We talked about this earlier, and we talked about the negative aspect of critical race theory. And when I take it out of the philosophical realm, and I move it now into the political realm. So we're moving it now into the realm of politics, which also then carries with it the baggage of social media, and it carries the baggage of the media by and large as a whole. Broad-based media, major networks, things like that. Well, what happens is I think that the idea of critical race theory then gets picked up by people and hijacked for their agenda rather than for what critical race theory stands for. So what happens now is if my agenda is that I'm a certain political persuasion and I want to see certain things happen, I hijack what that is and I provoke it. I incite emotion, demagoguery into it. So that what happens now is it no longer is, well, let's look at this thing and let's deal with it in a positive way so that everybody can come to the table and talk about it. And we can, as a society, construct a society where systemic racism or oppression of any kind, whether it be of any people, that would be eradicated every time it pops up. But what we've done in our society today, and I understand how it got there, but we've made it a black-white issue to some extent. But what we've done, or maybe let's say even the people of color against the whites. Well, the minute you do that, you deconstruct what critical race theory is. You destroy what it is. Because critical race theory says, let's come together, critique what our actions are, critique what is allowed in our society, and change that. But let's not promote violence for violence, anger for anger, because the minute you begin to do that, then one group has the ability to oppress the other group on either side of the issue. But critical race theory theory stands against any kind of oppression of any person. So whether the strong are bullying or the ones that were weak now become strong and they bully, doesn't strike to the core of critical race theory. And I think, and my concern is that in media and with our emotions, that's what's been hijacked in critical race theory. For the most part. What do you think about it? Or do you have any other thoughts?
No, I would agree. And my next question was going to be, is it a black or white issue, or black and white issue? But you kind of alluded to that. So it's not as much a black and white issue as it is a color or a nationality or a social group that has been oppressed.
Well, I think that's a broad stroke, yes. And yes and no. It is in that it catches the essence of it. But what I think that when we talk about critical race theory, there's this broader view that let's back up for a minute. When we talk about critical theory and we take the word race out, okay, I can put critical, place a word in the middle, and theory. So I can put critical and I can put feminism theory or critical LGBTQ theory. So the idea is that what's ever in the middle, in some cases, is the oppressed group. So it means that we're being critical of the oppressed group. So when you say critical race theory, you're saying that it's racism that we're attacking in this instance. And in attacking that in this instance, we're saying that we want to criticize our views of racism. Now, critical race theory, for the most part, has become a black and white issue. Now, it can be a color issue, and an issue of color. And you and I have talked about this, and the idea of when people say that when it comes to people, I don't see color. Well, that's false. We all see color. Because,
unless you're colorblind.
Well, even if you're colorblind, you see colors, you just see them differently, right? So the idea is if you look at this backdrop behind us, I mean, you see the color of the flowers, you see the color of the rocks, you see that your skin tone is different than my skin tone. Those things that you're wearing a black shirt, I'm wearing a white shirt, those things don't change. And so the same thing is when we say, well, I don't see color when it comes to people, the idea is that we do see color. But the idea is how we see color, not that we see it, it's that how we see it. You were going to ask a question or a comment.
That it just always has cracked me up when you hear people say, "Oh, I have friends that are black," or "I have friends that are Asian." It almost sounds racist to make the comment.
It is racist to some extent. I don't think that people understand it to be racist, but it is. Here's a good example of what I would call religious bigotry that kind of plays into this as well. Here's the idea. So let's say that you're a Christian and your neighbor is a Buddhist. And so you're talking with some Christians in a men's group or something. You say, my neighbor is the nicest guy on the planet, but he's a Buddhist, right? Or my guy is, my neighbor is the nicest guy on the planet, but he's a Hindu, he's a Muslim, he's a Catholic. Well, the minute we do that, what we're doing is there's a certain level of that we're degrading who they are. We're associating the fact that they're good, but we're discounting the fact, well, that goodness couldn't come from the fact that they're Buddhist, right? It's like if it's not Christian, it's not good, or whatever the case might be. So there's a level of bias there. So when we say, in that instance, when we simply say, I've got a friend, my best friend is so-and-so, so-and-so, and he's black, or he's Hispanic, he's Latinasian. Well, that is racist. That doesn't mean that we're not seeing people in their color, because we should. But the idea is their value isn't in their color. I mean, it is beautiful in their color, but their value is in their dignity as a person. It's not the worth because somebody's white and somebody is more worthy of something than because somebody's of a different skin tone, or vice versa. It's because they're a person that makes them valuable in all their different nationalities, all of the different races, and it's because it has to do with the dignity of the person and not with the color of our skin. If that makes any sense. I know there's probably a lot to unpack there. I hate saying that. I hate it when people say there's a lot to unpack. So forgive me for saying that. That is such an overused phrase. I'm not going to use it. So forget that I said that.
Amen, brother.
And that one too.
So that kind of leads us into the next question. What is the Christian thought on critical race theory?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea behind this series.
Is what's the Christian perspective on the matter? Yeah. Well, there's a lot to cover because I want to say, first of all, that we see color, and I don't want to be misunderstood on that. But I also want to say that our value is in the beauty of people's diversity. And God created everybody with a diversity. If God wanted everybody to be of a certain color, he would have created people of a certain color. But obviously he's created people of different ethnic mixes and different colors because there's this idea of plurality in God. This idea that those things are important to God. The fact that a white person exists is important to God. But it doesn't diminish the fact that a person is African American isn't just as important to God as well as an Asian person or a Latino. It doesn't matter. Because those things, we should be appreciating the beauty of that and the diversity of that, not thinking that in our society that one should oppress the other. So the Christian value kind of comes back to the woman at the well. I'm sorry, not the woman at the well, but the woman caught in adultery. So the woman caught in adultery, kind of the idea is that, you see, the scribes and Pharisees, they wanted to take away her dignity. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to say she's not worthy because of who she is, meaning a female, and what she's done. And so therefore, we want to oppress her and take away her dignity. But the Christian perspective is just the opposite of that. And this is why Christianity has something to say in the midst of this. Because critical race theory, apart from God, or apart from really, and I'm going to say the Christian perspective of God, the Judeo-Christian perspective, it loses its impetus and it loses power. Let me explain what I mean by that. Christianity and the Judeo-Christian faith tradition as a whole values the human race more than any other religious system that there is, the dignity of the human race. That's why when you even talk about abortion, the reason that becomes so heated within a Christian context is because the Christian community actually believes in the dignity of the fetus that's there, seeing that as a person, and that person having rights given to it by God. And that becomes very important. Because you see, the rights that are given to people are not given by people, they're given by God. So what happens is whenever we simply say that a certain people group is not worthy to stand before their Creator, then what we're basically saying to them is they don't have the right to stand there. But we didn't create them. God created them.
Right.
The Apostle Paul kind of talks about that in Romans chapter 14, where he says, you want to criticize another man's servant. And I love what God says, or what the Apostle Paul says there. He says, but God's able to make them stand. The fact of the matter is that everybody has the right to stand before God because God is able to make them stand. They don't answer to us. They answer to God. They answer to God for their own moral choices and their own moral lives. That's the first thing. And so the person is important to God, no matter what we are, who we are. It doesn't matter if we classify ourselves, and we can talk about this, but it's kind of off topic. I think that that's one of the problems I have with the evangelical church and other Christian churches when it deals with the LGBTQ community as well. The idea that it's like, gosh, they're a really great person, but they're gay, but they're lesbian, but they're queer. The fact is that God created them, and that's for them and God to decide and to figure out, rather than it's our place to figure out. So our Christian perspective is that everybody has the right to stand before God. Jesus is emphatic about that. He never does anything but that. And Jesus is our example of that. So anytime we get into a situation, whenever we try to devalue anybody based on anything, then what's happened is we're standing between them and God and the dignity that God has given to all men and women. For example, in the Genesis account, God said that he made man and woman in his image and in his likeness. If any man and any woman is made in the image, or humanity is made in the image of God, our job is to let God sort it out, not us. But our job, if we follow Jesus' example, is to stop systems and systemic systems that oppress people. Jesus was very upset that these people wanted to oppress that woman. And I challenge you that if you go through the Bible, that one of the things that you're going to see is all the way through the Bible, from the very beginning, first books, it starts with Cain and Abel, and it goes all the way through to even so come quickly, Lord Jesus. The fight and the struggle is always against oppression. God always stands on the side of the oppressed, not the oppressor. That's why he says, Pharaoh, let my people go. The spirit of Pharaoh, let my people go. And the reason is because he was oppressing the people of Israel. The very reason that Jesus Christ came was to set the oppressed free. And he talks about that. I think it's in Luke chapter 4, about the Spirit of the Lord being upon him to do exactly that. So that's the Christian perspective on critical race theory. Racism is a reality in our society. It's not going away anytime soon. But what's the Christian perspective? The Christian perspective is that all people have dignity regardless of race. It doesn't matter what their race is, and other categories as well. And I guess the question I would probably have to ask you, and as we get ready to close on this here in the next couple of minutes, is how do we really enact what our thought is about the dignity of the person? How do we use that in our society today? What should a Christian do when they confront situations where people are being oppressed?
Well, I think the natural response is you're shocked and you turn around and walk away. And I think that's where we've gotten it wrong as a people or society or Christian church, is to not call people out on that. Keep the emotion removed, but give them a little slap. Let them know that that's not right. That's not how we're supposed to be treating other people. You know, we talk about our homeless group that sleeps out front of the church, and it's so easy to get so angry and so uptight and so upset, but we have to treat them with the dignity they deserve too. And I think that's one thing that I've really struggled with personally, because again, it's so easy to be angry because they don't clean up after themselves. And I think, you know, if you walk up in front of the church, you're disgusted because it's dirty, but they're still people too.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And the last time I checked, Jesus Christ came and died for people. He gave his life for people. And we don't get to pick who he chooses. He chooses us all. There's the universal call to the gospel, and that is, for God so loved the world, the cosmos really is what it is, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever, that whosoever, that whosoever, that whosoever. Doesn't matter what social economic status they are. It doesn't matter what their gender identity is. It doesn't matter. Whosoever is inclusive of all people. And the thing that critical race theory does is it says where systems of oppression are there because of race, it says, I'm calling foul. You use the word slap. She used it when you use that, it was off of a conversation we had earlier. And we're not talking there about a physical slap, but we're talking about that proverb that says, better is the slap of a friend than the kiss of an enemy. I think that when we're confronting issues of critical race theory or other things where people are being oppressed, our job as Christians is to call them out on that, like you said, is to confront them with that, rather than just to wink and let it go, but say, but wait a minute, that's not right. What that guy just did was not right. And, you know, I could tell you that we've done it in the past. I've done it in the past, and it's always met with resistance, and I understand why. But the fact is those are some things that we're called to do as Christians. Doesn't make it easy, but here's what it does do. It makes us prophetic as Christians. It makes us prophetic as Christians because we say, what that person did, or what you said, or what Christianity is representing, That's not right. It's a system of oppression, and it should be dealt with at that level. Now, we can do that with grace, and we can do it with love. But it is something that we have to do. Well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about critical race again next week, or do you think we're ready to talk about something else?
Whatever you say.
You have no idea, huh? I don't either. Well, we'll think about it this week, and maybe we'll move on to some other things. I still want to talk about Black Lives Matter in the midst of this. Blue Lives Matter, defunding the police. I want to talk about these issues as a Christian because I think they're important. And I hope that you're with us and listening. You may agree or disagree, and I may have said something wrong. Penny might have. And if we did, we want to be corrected. We want to say things right. We don't want to be provocative. We want to be humble in what we're doing. But we do want to discuss this stuff because it's important as Christians. And the one thing I want to do in life as I'm getting older is I want to represent God well. That's important to me. That the heart of God, the mind of God, and the thoughts of God are something that we can convey together in our ministry. And I hope that today we're able to do that. I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you have a great day. Penny, do you want to close us out?
I think you just did.
Well, God bless you. Think about this. Maybe it'll help you understand it a little bit more and fall in love with God a little bit more. But remember this, Father's house, that we're a thinking people first. God bless you and have a great day.